Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration, and connections from all flavours of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your questions answered, and contribute to the community dialogue. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our weekly Passive House Accelerator live webinars. In the meantime, here's this week's Passive House podcast. Welcome back to the Passive House podcast. I'm Matthew Cutler-Welsh, coming to you from Auckland, New Zealand. And this week we've got joining us Zach Semke. How are you doing, Zach?
I'm well, thank you.
And Mary James. How are you, Mary?
I'm good.
And thanks for joining us back on the show, Mary. You've got an interview with a fairly frequent guest, probably a pretty well-known personality on the Passive House Accelerator, Bronwyn Barry, author, frequent guest on podcasts. I think she's been on quite a few lives, and she'll be well-known to a lot of people. I really enjoyed listening to your live conversation touring around a house recently in the Passive House Open Days. So we'll get into that. But Zach, you want to do a quick shout out to some people to thank?
Yes, absolutely. So everything that we do here at Passive House Accelerator, including the Passive House podcast, comes thanks to the support from these fine organizations. So our stakeholder partner is NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. Thank you, too, to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Glavel, Ingui Architecture, Partel, Rockwell North America, Stillcorp, and Zola Windows. And thank you to our champion sponsors, Bewizo, Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, PH Air Seal, and Source 2050.
Awesome. Now, if I may, before we jump into this week's interview, as we're recording this, the Olympics is about to start, and I heard the story. I don't know if you guys have come across this, but I heard it this morning, and Zach, it kind of made me think of you because I know you have a fan operating fairly continuously in your little office at the moment. But have you guys seen or heard about the giant air purifier stacks in Paris?
No.
I only just heard about it this morning, but apparently they've installed some massive outdoor air filters right in the middle of Paris. You can, if you have a search, you can find them. And as I said, it made me think about we've talked about the boxes that have been required in parts of where both of you live during fire season. And this also comes up in your interview, Mary, about that Bronwyn talks about the benefits of passive houses in areas that are prone to wildfires and how that helps with just keeping air clean. And it just made me it's kind of amazing that the city is in need of something like that. And we've seen pictures of other cities around the world where air quality is so bad, but it's quite a staggering investment, I would think, and quite a it just seems like an incredible thing that a city would go to that extent to try and clean up the air. But check that out as you're watching the Olympics. Have a look for the air purifiers in Paris, and I guess we all need to just do what we can to encourage people to build healthy homes that don't need external air purifiers.
Crazy.
Yeah. So that's a little side story there for me that I thought was worth mentioning when I heard about it this morning. But let's get on to this week's interview. Mary, before we jump into it, tell us how you came to be on looking at a building with Bronwyn.
Well, it was, as you say, part of the Passive House Open House Days back in June. And it's always fun to actually see a project in real life rather than just read about it or write about it or talk to people about it. So, it wasn't, that far from my house, and really ticked a lot of boxes as far as what California homes can aspire to be and to deliver in terms of comfort and performance. So.
And is there are there links or images anywhere that people can go and see? Do you know?
I believe so. Certainly on the Passive House California website, and also Passive House Network website for the Passive House Open House days. You can go and see some images there.
All right. Well, let's jump into it. This is Mary's chat on site with Bronwyn Barry.
I'm here with Bronwyn Barry.
Hi, Mary.
At her project in Sacramento. It's a single-family home in a very nice neighborhood of single-family homes. And by nice, I mean a lot of mature trees, which is lovely. So, Bronwyn, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, Mary. This is Bronwyn Barry. I'm an architect based in San Francisco, and I do passive house projects all around California. So thanks for coming to see the Sacramento version.
Right. Well, I was really excited to see this for many reasons, but one of them is I know you made a special effort to focus on the embodied carbon of the building, and very interesting insulation products that you've used in this. Before we get into that, let's start with the beginning, the foundation.
Sure. So part of my, real holistic look at buildings really is not just focusing on the performance, but as you mentioned, also the embodied carbon. And this project really presented an opportunity to save the existing foundation. Because when I came in and did an as-built set of drawings, and I crawled the crawl space and I went in the attic, what really stood out was the fact that this particular house had a really decent foundation, and pretty much everything else needed to go.
Right. We should probably back up and say that the existing house, before you started this project, was I understand, a 2-bedroom, 1-bath sort of cottage style.
Yes, sort of a post-war workers' cottage. It was a floor plan that was built in many neighborhoods all around California, thrown up quick.
Very little, if any, insulation at all.
No insulation. Very, workmanlike, sort of worker cottage, not much amenity. Didn't connect very well to the street or the backyard, and just was too small. My clients had, it was growing family, and they just needed a bit more room, but they love the neighborhood. It is a lovely neighborhood. As you say, mature trees. It's a great, feature of Sacramento, and it's walkable to stores and restaurants, and easy for them to commute to their jobs downtown. They both work for the state.
So it's pretty rare to be able to reuse an existing foundation. That's significant embodied carbon savings right there.
Yes, and I couldn't forego that opportunity, because as you say, most houses, the thing that needs redoing is the foundation. You can save a lot of the framing, but this one, there was a lot of dry rot in the framing. The configuration of the house really wasn't great for, reusing much of it, but the foundation was in decent shape. So we salvaged and reused most of the existing foundation, and I did a design that allowed the structural engineer to transfer the additional loads for the second story to the extension, the additional footings on the front and the back. So it was a clever integration of like architecture and structural engineering. with a little bit of cajoling and nudging to the city, both the planning department sort of questioned that and the building department. And then the inspector also took it upon himself to also flag that. So we literally fought for that detail all the way through the process. But we prevailed.
Succeeded, yes. And moving up the walls, can you please talk about the unusual insulation products here?
Sure. So we started out with my favorite standard dense pack cellulose in the wall cavity. We have a 2x6 wall cavity. And then I had specified a rigid exterior insulation, and I love the low embodied carbon products. This house, we managed to procure the first batch of rigid exterior hemp insulation called Plant Panel. I'm saying it in American accent, so people know. It's made by Hempitecture, and it comes out of Idaho, and we're really delighted to be able to use that on this house.
That's great. So the hemp panel is, as you say, it's a new product to most people, and it's great to have a bio-based alternative that's locally, fairly local for us in California. So that's very exciting. And there's another low carbon insulation product that's been around for quite a while, but it's still rare, I would say, not always on the front burner for people.
Commonly used, yes. And this was a product the contractor, Good Space Builders, happened to, be a fan of, and they had a spare, a couple of bales of the wool insulation made by Havelock Wool, and they used it in lieu of the spray foam insulation around the window rough openings. Once you install the frame into the rough opening, there's typically a little gap that is very commonly insulated with spray foam. And what they did instead was to use that wool insulation to stuff in between that gap. And it was a beautiful use of what's often a little more expensive product, but much nicer to use and very sort of appropriate to put in that spot, because it also doesn't hold moisture. So it's a great use of another natural fiber product in this project.
That's great. And speaking of the windows, that's another fairly local product that was chosen partially for a number of reasons, but it has also a lower embodied carbon than some other window products. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I've really been enjoying being able to source my products a lot more locally. They're still not all made in California yet, which I think will be the ultimate measure of success. But we specified a product called Fenster windows. They're made on Vancouver Island up in British Columbia. And this is an all wood window. So I was also fortunate to have my clients agree to not having aluminum cladding on these windows, because that also really has a big embodied carbon footprint. So the wood is sourced all in British Columbia and milled by the manufacturer in their factory. They're built up in Vancouver Island, and then they were shipped down to us here in
And they have a seal
Sacramento.
in lieu of the aluminum.
Yes, so they have a sealant on the outside that is UV, that has a UV protectant in it, which really is great. So they're a light wood window, again, also chosen to not absorb much heat. But they're finished in the factory, so all nicely sealed with this UV coating, which I'm really hoping will work really well here. But I'm excited about the windows. They're beautiful, all wood, and the price was very affordable.
And they are really beautiful windows. Triple pane, of course.
Of course.
And other measures taken to other typical passive house measures, one of the big considerations these days is preventing overheating, as well as, of course, reducing the heating load during the winter, which in Sacramento, the winters here get cold. Maybe not as cold as, say, Toronto or something, but they get cold.
It's all relative.
So, of course, there was attention paid to shading.
Yes. The challenge on this house was that the street is west facing, the front street, but we were helped by the fact that they're big trees. The street trees, they really help with shading. The back of the house is east facing. So part of the design also has, a big steep, deep overhangs. The big sliding door in the great room was set back to get as much, recess as possible on that to just help mitigate the heat. And, we've done our best to really keep the heat out, given our non-optimized orientation. There is, I did have some exterior awnings spec'd for this house, which probably will not get installed immediately, but these have also been soffitted, so we do have an opportunity to add exterior insulation at any future time.
Exterior.
As needed. Exterior, either Venetians.
Exterior shading.
Exterior shading, yes.
And even though this house is not located in a wildfire urban interface zone, it is fairly fire resistant.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
So I like to design all houses in California really fireproof, because I think all of California is a fire zone. The exterior is predominantly stucco. All the overhangs have a closed soffit. They are vented, but I specified a product called Vulcan Vent that closes and seals so that there's no embers can come into the eaves during a smoke event. So it's with a standing seam metal roof. Again, also really high fire rating. So it's designed for not only smoke tightness from the air sealing, but smoke resilience from the materials palette.
Right. So these are the advantages of a passive house in our climate of today, that you have to think about smoke resilience and fire resilience, but passive house, as well as, of course, comfort and reducing peak heating and cooling loads in, of course, this all-electric house, right?
Yes, it's all electric. I have not done any gas appliances since 2011. So that's sort of a default. Got heat pump water heater. We have a mini split that we salvaged as well from the original house and reinstalled it in the downstairs great room. And I have a ducted one upstairs for the bedrooms and the sort of central stairwell. And then, of course, passive house, we included a energy recovery ventilator. We have a Brink unit from 475 in this project, which has a really high, I think it's up 95% recovery efficiency.
Well, that's great. And I know there are many other people at this open house waiting to talk with you. So I just want to wrap up by jumping back to the permitting process, which had its hurdles and could have been facilitated if only there was an alternate compliance pathway for using passive house to get the permit for the energy modeling. And you're involved in an effort to make this easier and doable. Yes. Can you talk about that?
So I'm really delighted. There is a growing coalition of us being led originally by a group called Climate Action California, who is working with both the Passive House Network and Passive House California and now a big coalition. I think we're at 60 plus other organizations all around California who are supporting a proposal to add Passive House as an alternate compliance pathway to our Title 24 Energy Code. This means that we will be able to use either PHPP or WFI Passive to submit our energy compliance documentation to obtain a building permit and not have to do 2 energy models, which is going to be a huge benefit.
And only one of those energy models parallels closely to actual use, energy use, post-occupancy. So it's really would be a huge advantage to be able to only do the one Passive House modeling, energy model.
Yes, we are really pleased to be able to support the California goals for climate action to sort of meet our climate emissions reduction targets using Passive House, which has already been adopted in many other states. And so we're hoping to bring California up to speed and include it in that effort.
Well, that would be really exciting as a tool for spreading Passive House in California, making it less arduous for people.
Yeah, I think that's, we're just simply asking to have one more barrier removed, to not have to do 2 different energy models, because we have shown that by targeting Passive House and aiming for certified Passive House, that does meet the code compliance targets and deliver what the state has mandated for all of California's buildings to meet.
And it's very exciting because this house is being certified. You are pursuing certification
yes,
for
are. So the CPHD on this project is Steve Mann. The certifier is actually PHI themselves. And we've also got great support from Vlad Petzel at eMod Studio in Massachusetts, who's done all the thermal bridge calculations. So it's been really a fabulous journey to kind of keep, to the strict requirements that certification really requires.
Great. Well, congratulations on a beautiful project. I mean, we didn't really talk about the many design details, and I know you have other people wanting to talk to you. So it's a gorgeous project and a wonderful example of improving the quality of housing in existing neighborhoods. So thanks so much, Bronwyn.
Thank you, Mary. Always a pleasure.
And that was Bronwyn Barry there in California with one of her passive houses that she's been involved in. Mary, what was the main takeaway from your visit there?
Well, I just really enjoyed the all the products that she was using in this project, and the way that she had thought through operational energy use, but also embodied carbon, and how she really went to extra efforts to source products that were lower in embodied carbon, starting with the foundation. I thought that was pretty exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah. I didn't catch it, but has the house gone up higher than the original house? Because it seemed like a fairly small footprint, or is it still the same height as the original?
Well, it was the original was 1 story, and this had 2 stories. So yes.
Right. Yeah, because I think she said it was only a 2-bedroom home or something originally.
Yes. Yeah. Sounded pretty tiny.
So hemp very interested in the plant panels and hemp as a material. I know there's significant advantages of that, similar to straw, in that it's very quick to grow. And so as an alternative to things like pine and other timbers, which take a long time to grow, there's some very attractive elements to that.
But yeah, I think anybody in California who was looking for lower embodied carbon ways to insulate your house, it sounds like a great product.
Yeah. The other thing that I found really interesting, I hadn't thought of this, it's kind of obvious. It's one of those things that's obvious once it's stated, but the idea of having different insulation materials for different parts of the building. Bron was talking about switching out spray foams around the windows and using wool to plug those gaps. And I guess that's pretty common, that we do have different ways of sealing different parts of the building and using different materials. But you often think, looking at a specification, that you choose a particular supplier and you choose a particular product. But I quite like that idea of finding different materials, and they can be natural and locally based if possible, but not necessarily restricting yourself to one particular, not even just one particular supplier, but necessarily one particular base material for a function of the building. Of course, we have quite a lot of sheep's wool here in New Zealand, which is a relatively popular form of insulation here, and has some pretty impressive properties to it. So good to hear that being used there. Zach, what were your highlights?
Well, I thought it was great to hear about the application of sheep's wool too. And to your point, I think about looking at different materials and suppliers. It's also an indication of where we're at. Like, this is the low embodied carbon storing materials world is still new, and so I think that probably a lot of practitioners are eagerly looking for the new thing, these rapidly renewable materials like hemp and the alternatives to spray foam are really exciting. I just want to do a shout out to an event that we have planned for December 6th. We're doing a Reimagine Buildings conference focused on carbon storage. So biomaterials, green concrete. We're working with Chris Magwood, in partnership with Chris Magwood at RMI, to produce this. So if people are curious about the latest products and solutions around that, we'll be focusing on a few kind of difficult to address areas in buildings, and the new products that are providing solutions around that. So please stay tuned for that. Also, Mary, you mentioned in the conversation about when you guys were talking about the alternative compliance path to Title 24 in California, which is super exciting. The accelerator is really happy to have signed on to support that as well as part of that coalition. You mentioned that when there's the, WUFI passive and PHPP, and then the energy model for the code, and you said only one of these energy models parallels closely to actual energy use. And when you said that, I just want to clarify. I think you meant the passive house models, both PHPP and WUFI passive.
Of course,
right? Is that right?
Course.
Yeah.
I meant as opposed to the
right,
our California state energy model, which doesn't generally have that same close tracking.
And that is such a common story of this performance gap that you see between energy models and actual energy performance. Certainly, even with like LEED certified buildings, and it's something that is one of the real strengths of Passive House, both VS and PHI approaches, is that energy performance gap is very small or non-existent. And you're bringing energy use so low anyway that the absolute gap is by definition going to be smaller. So good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's similar to the work from Australia that Talina did, comparing the PHPP models across various different states with their NatHERS, the National Home Energy Rating Scheme, and looking at the actual performance of buildings compared to those models, and PHPP often comes out very good there, partly because it deals with infiltration much better than some of the other models that are around. I should also note that I was quite proud there for a moment that we have, in our last iteration of our insulation requirements here in New Zealand, as that part of the building code cites PHPP. And that's really exciting. You have to sort of dig to find it, but having the Passive House planning package formally written into one of the verification methods of compliance for our energy efficiency clause of the building code here in New Zealand has now been in place since, for the last couple of years. I suspect I can do a little shout out to Elron Burrell for sneaking that in there, because he was part of the team that was involved in doing that. But it's quite significant. It seems like a small step, but just having that there is quite powerful when we come to building consent applications in the council and say, no, look, you can use this report, this summary of PHPP as compliance, and no, you don't need another calculation or another piece of paper to prove that. So it's exciting to see that happening elsewhere. Mary, I just want to pick up on the shading, because you also asked Bronwyn about that, and it seems like not all the shading had been installed, but it also seems like that was a pretty significant aspect of the design, was dealing with the risk of potential overheating in the future. And this is something we're going to be talking about more in the future here on the podcast. But did you get a sense of how it was performing as it was, and was it going to need to have that additional external shading on, do you think?
Well, it was performing pretty well the day I went there. It was quite hot, probably 100 degrees out, and it was fine inside. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people still balk at spending the money on exterior shading. Fortunately, a lot of the preventive measures for overheating had been built into the design, the large overhangs and, the shading, making sure you're taking advantage of shading from the large trees that were on the street. So, I mean, it's kind of classic Passive House design, really.
Yeah.
And Bronwyn is experienced enough to build that into her design without even, I'm sure it's second nature by now. And it was great to hear also how she just built into the home's design being fireproof and smoke-proof, and how well that works with Passive House. And, and unfortunately in California, as Bronwyn said, all of California has to be considered a fire zone. I don't know where you're not susceptible. So,
yeah, definitely seems prudent. Awesome. Hey, well, thank you for that. Really great that you could whip out the microphone and take that opportunity. I felt like I had a little taste of being there. Really great to see these open homes and know that other people are going and experiencing them as well, and really feeling that difference on site, hopefully inspiring them. All right, Zach, we're still on a little bit of a break from regular programming, but we've got one or two other announcements.
Yeah, we do. Well, a big one is that next week we're going to launch our special cooling and resilience series of the Passive House podcast. So this conversation about shading and dealing with overheating and the threat of overheating and also wildfire smoke is very apropos. So we are doing a special thing with this series, which is to invite folks to come and record a quick voicemail for us at a tool called SpeakPipe. And so we'll have a little link in the show notes to this. But basically, if you could click on that link and come and record a short message, what's your DIY cooling or summer resilience solution? As part of this series, we'd love to hear from you how you're keeping cool and wildfire smoke free this summer. Do you have any fun solutions? Have you DIY'd or MacGyvered a ceiling fan or makeshift icebox? We want to know. So please record your message, keep it short and sweet. Let us know your name and where you're calling in from, and you may be featured in an upcoming episode.
Awesome. All right. Thanks for that. Thanks for tuning in, and Mary, for your great interview. And we'll be back again next week on Passive House Podcast.